live and who I wanted to be. So there was a big picture. But I never, again, I was always honest about being with these people, these women. And so it wasn't a pretend life. I knew I had some of my friends from the past. So it wasn't like I just kind of went through this looking glass into this other thing.
You said that the most difficult moment of your life was telling your daughter you were gay because you thought she might not love you anymore.
Yeah.
I felt the exact same thing with my brother. It was really, really tough. When I told him, he looked at his wife and said, "I told you." Like he knew all along and it never mattered a bit. What was it like for you?
She asked me. This was maybe a year after my ex and her mother and I had gotten a divorce. And she said, "Are you gay?" And she's probably 11.
She just asked you at the table.
We were having dinner.
Daddy, are you gay?
Are you gay? And I said, yeah. And she kind of pulled away from the table. And that at that second was just like, oh, shit, like if she loves me less or thing, that would be unbearable. But it was just kind of her processing it.
Well, also just the notion that somebody would love you less for being who you are is horrifying.
Yeah, especially after when I was so much in the process of really just kind of peeling all, the fancy apartment, the big job, the going away every summer. Like I was just like, it's not really who I am. It doesn't really fit. So to kind of get down to who I really was and then, like you said, like have it be less than from someone who I love so much was really, but it was about 3 seconds.
But she's thrilled.
She's thrilled, and now she has a girlfriend, so go figure.
Wonderful.
She's been living with a partner for like over a year.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So at that time, you moved to a studio in Bushwick, which was a bohemian neighborhood in Brooklyn at the time.
Yeah.
At the time. It was far less chic then than it is today.
Yeah.
And you started a blog titled What I Saw Today.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that?
I could not get a job. I could not get a job designing. It was after the economy tanked. Up until that point, I had really, nice jobs, freelance jobs, big salaries, expense accounts. It all went away. And people were kind of, well, you're 55 or 56 and we can hire some 30-year-old and pay them $28,000. Why do we need you? So, and I remember there was about 6 months of I couldn't get a job. I'd walk into stores. Do you need a cashier? I'd walk to J. Crew. I could love to be a salesperson here. I know everything about menswear. Crickets, nothing. And it was just like, oh shit, like it was like I ran out of money. I had a lot of money that I lost. And it was just like, I got to make something happen fast. Someone said, try a blog. They're free. You don't have to do, you just start posting drawings and see what happens.
That just took you to an entirely new stratosphere. And I mean, as much as I'd like to tell everybody that's listening to this podcast that, just put your stuff out there and you too will be discovered by Misha Prada, that's not really practical. How did you...
That's not practical, but I have to say, put your stuff out there.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
Okay.
But yes, no question.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that I've ever made has been self-generated.
Right.
It wasn't like, it was like, here, do that, Deb.
Right.
But you just start putting your work up there. All of a sudden, the world discovers you.
And I had no anticipation. I mean, I was selling art books to buy groceries for me and my dad. I mean, it was really down to like, this is serious. I was about to get evicted. I don't know. Other than I had to, as you said before, I had to kind of go through this full cycle of who I really was to get to a place to like show how I felt about a drawing and how I felt about what I see and how I felt about, what the line was that I was putting down. When that line was honest, people responded to it.
Can you describe the blog for our listeners that might not be aware of everything that you're doing or had done back then?
The blog was really, at first I thought, because my background was in design, I thought, well, I'll start kind of a trend report. And this was early blogging, like very few people even had blogs. And it just quickly turned into like, fuck it, like I just want to draw. Like I love living here so much and I see incredible stuff every day. I'm just going to call it What I Saw Today and post what I see, or my version of what I see. And the first guy, I remember exactly, I was sitting in Union Square Park and there was this guy, I don't know, maybe like 20 feet away. His profile with this beautiful afro was like this incredible shape. And I just drew it. And I remember scanning it and posting it that night. And then people started just, because it was the beginning of blogging and people were just like on it.
Well, blogging really started in 2003. This is like well into 5 years into. I think it's just a little bit more than, you were one of the first.
Okay.
No offense.
I guess you're right. Maybe that's but I remember maybe it was just, for me, seemed really new.
You were showcasing really simple but really elegant charcoal on paper sketches of mostly well-dressed dudes.
Yeah.
And nearly overnight, the blog caught the eye of Miuccia Prada, who commissioned you to create illustrations for a line of T-shirts and then a book. Do you know how she found your work?
And this is kind of another lesson about just saying yes and keep going to everything. A friend of mine, well, I shouldn't even know him, this guy, Bruce Pask, who was a fashion director of the New York Times men's section, saw my work, saw the blog. And so he commissioned me to do like the 10 best looks from New York for Paris on the New York Times website. And I had a small job I was doing in Milan, and Bruce said, well, you should contact my friends at Prada. They'd love your work. So I contacted them, and I had missed the show by a day, but they said, oh, well, just come. You can come to the showroom and draw. And for me, that was like
still
heaven.
My beating heart.
No, it was just like they opened the doors and I almost burst into tears. It was like, this is like everything I've ever wanted in my life. And I just kind of hung out and drew, which that in itself would have been amazing. And I posted it. And then, I don't know, maybe 3 months later, Sunday morning, the phone rang and it was Alessio from Prada. He said, Richard, we want you to come to the show, the men's show. You draw the show. Maybe we do a little project, and that it was just like, holy shit, like this is, it's Prada. And then the book happened and then T-shirt. It just kind of kept going and going. And so that really took things on another level, obviously.
You have now done quite a lot of live drawing at the biggest and most prestigious fashion shows. Do you have a different approach when you draw at a fashion show than when you're drawing on the street or if you're drawing in your studio?
Yeah, they're really different. For me, drawing at a show, it really goes back to those New York Times drawings from '62. It's like, how can I really get this information down? And it's really quick because the models are just there and then they're gone. So it's really, oddly enough, you can tell a lot about what's happening with the head, like where the hair is going and all that. And then it's really just shape. So it's like, I really just, I want to let people know what I'm seeing. And it's basically shape and then the model's gone. So that's a very different thing than doing a portrait in my apartment.
Now, your work, it's not really just fashion illustration. You seem to be able to capture the essence, the real soul of the people that you're drawing. And earlier on, when you first thought about how someone could make these beautiful drawings with just a few lines and give out all that information, I actually felt like you were describing your own work. Because with just a stroke, you convey emotion. There's a wistfulness or a heartbreak or a pathos. Your humanity is just in these lines. And I also asked this question to Alison Bechdel, who I think also can do this with just one or two lines. How are you able to embed so much emotion in just a few singular lines?
I don't think about it, but I think that, again, it goes back to being five. Like to me, a line is the most beautiful thing in the world. And for me, a line is it's all the humanity. It's pain, pleasure, it's beauty, it's not beauty. Those are all the things I see every day in humanity. That's one reason why I love living in Bushwick. It's just this kind of nonstop humanity. It just gives me so much kind of energy and hope and passion, and I want to go back and draw it because it's so extraordinary.
You've said that drawing is a personal interpretation of how an artist sees the world, and it's your choice to determine how much reality you want to bring in.
Yeah.
And when you're working on more commercial work, you need to include a lot of information about the product. And when you're at a fashion show, you look for details to tell the story, a pocket or a proportion, as you've said. So can you define how you see the world via the kind of illustrations that you're creating? Is that possible to do?
I think of what happens in the drawing, again, I want to leave something out to bring someone else into it. So I think that the engagement with whomever is seeing it is kind of the most important thing. So that determines it. I mean, as I'm drawing and I'm not really thinking about it, but I'm always editing the information to not spell everything out, to just, again, bring in someone else. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Since your first success with Prada, you've worked with the New York Times, the London Sunday Times Style Magazine, Mr. Porter, GQ, Gap, J. Crew, Union Made, Dries Van Noten, and the list goes on and on. What have been some of your favorite fashion collaborations?
First of all, and it sounds really corny, I'm thrilled if anyone asks me to collaborate.
That's the way I feel too.
Yeah, it's like
I'm just so grateful for the work.
I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I mean, I don't want to say like, I mean, of course, having a book made by Prada is an amazing thing. But truthfully, last year I went to Colombia in Central America for 4 days and drew coffee plantations. And it was an amazing experience. So is that less than? It's not. I mean, it's work, you know, and I'm really grateful people want to pay me and people are really respond and have a great life. So I can't call out one other than the other.
You've worked with Siki Im.
Yeah.
Siki Im?
Yeah.
And you drew on clothes for the runway on the spot.
Yes.
At the runway show, just drawing on demand. So I want to ask, what was that like? And can you tell us the story? I know that there was somebody that was kind of obnoxious and you had some fun with the drawing that you did.
Yeah.
Tell us that story. I think that's a good radio story.
It's a good radio story. I mean, I have to back up because Siki is this extraordinary man. He's an incredible designer and visionary, and he does exactly what he wants to do. And he and his stylist, they brought me and they said, listen, we want you to draw on these clothes. Just come up and see the collection and, you know, and then come to the show. So I look at the collection. They give me scraps of fabric. These are like beautiful Italian wools. All the samples are handmade. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But I went back and I bought these white, beautiful oil crayons. I show up like half an hour before the show, and Siki starts handing me like this $10,000 coat. Says, draw on this. So I draw like a big profile. And then they're like, draw on this. So they like hand me boots, and I draw on the boots. And then there was this guy towards the end of the show. I mean, how it happened was amazing. And this guy was being a real asshole. So Siki said, draw a big dick on his pants. And I said, like, this guy's being such a dick. Because there's really no, you know, this all happens within like 18 minutes. There's no time for anything. So I drew this huge penis, like kind of, you know, spewing. And then I just wrote, draw a big dick on the other side of on the other leg and said, here are your pants. Make it work.
Payback.
Payback's a bitch, you know? It's like, don't mess with us backstage.
And if you can, talk a little bit about your collaboration with Dries Van